Welcome back, everybody, to the DomCast episode 58. And yeah, the first part of the off season. Well, it's not really the first of the off season, but it's the first one where I'm like really interviewing someone I hadn't worked with before. Is coming a little bit late. I won't even lie to y'all. It snuck up on me. A week passed. I was real busy, and I was going, oh wait, yes, off season. Summer league's going on. I have not had a pod yet. So, what better way to start it than with someone who is covering a team that had been in the news? It might be a little bit drowned out by now, but I want more information on this team and the moves they made. So I've actually brought in Atlanta Hawks reporter Pat Benson. Pat, thank you for coming on the podcast. Welcome.
Dom, my man, I appreciate the invite. I'm so happy to be here. Longtime fan, first time caller.
Absolutely, yeah, and probably, well, I know for sure it won't be the last time. For anyone listening to the podcast, you already know this is on Spotify, it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on YouTube, so the ratings help, much appreciated, 5 stars on Spotify, like button on YouTube if that does anything these days. And we will first hop in so that you're familiar with Pat, and so I get familiar with Pat, because like I said, I hadn't worked with him before. You can just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to working with the Hawks, and what your career path right now actually entails. I'm interested too, because
Yeah, for sure. So I cover the Hawks for SIs and Fan Nation's allhawks.com. So it hasn't always been a linear progression to get here. You know, working in the media, you're going to take some steps forward, some steps back, but really just I'll pick up in 2020. I started writing for Forbes. I covered the Hawks then, and then of course the pandemic hit, league got suspended, and I was let go, unfortunately, you know, during the hiatus in action, and wrote a book, Kobe Bryant's Sneaker History. And then luckily that turned into a job that I have right now. So definitely been fortunate, and can definitely say I've caught some lucky breaks.
Okay, and in that right there, I'm sorry, did you say you wrote a book?
Yeah. So it's Kobe Bryant's Sneaker History 96 to 2020. And it was something I wrote during the early stages of the pandemic, I guess. I'm not sure if we're saying it's over yet or if it's just the new normal or whatever. But yeah, so I wrote it and put it on Amazon and donated the first year's worth of proceeds to various charities, just because, you know, I wasn't really trying to make a profit off, you know, a tragedy. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, and luckily I met the director and editor of SI's NBA and sneakers coverage during that process. And even after I wrote the book, man, there weren't that many websites or that many publications hiring. So I reached out to my friend. I said, hey, you know, right now I see there's nothing going on with Atlanta. Like, can I try? And he's like, well, I can't really promise anything, but here's who you need to speak with. And luckily enough, I got on, and you know, I'm just so lucky, man. I get to cover prime Trae Young, so it's a blessing.
Oh no, absolutely. Prime Trae Young, and now DeJounte Murray too, which came out of nowhere because I didn't expect that trade. That's kind of where we'll be starting. But yeah, no, first of all, congratulations on that. You know, a couple of people that I've worked with so far, they've told me their paths to working with NBA teams and just kind of getting in where they fit in, and it's always a story like this. It's just really cool to see. So and the last thing with that was, yeah, I did see on your Twitter too, so you're working with the Hawks and you're also working with some sneaker coverage now, which I'm assuming is related to the work you did, correct? You're working
That's exactly right. So everything I've been doing with the Hawks has been on top of a 40-hour work week, doing a customer service job on a college campus's financial aid office. Mm-hmm. So man, there are times where I'd be coming in on little to no sleep, and I'd be typing articles while getting cussed out on the phone. So I feel like the quality of content is only going to improve. And obviously I'm a sneakerhead, so I'm super excited to be doing both.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, make sure we link after the podcast. I get that link and put it in the comment section and description of this pod. All right, well, yeah, congratulations on that. Awesome to hear. Let's go ahead and start with the team that you are covering and what happened this summer, because that's kind of the questions that everyone is having surrounding the Atlanta Hawks. Like you said, covering a prime Trae Young, had this run in 2021, getting to the conference finals, and we're going to talk about kind of the differences between that team and when it came into 2022. But I think that we saw in the playoffs, they got up against a somewhat healthy Miami Heat, and the matchup was glaring. Like, all they really had to do was close Trae Young out. The perimeter defense, they did not have another creator, and it got fairly easy for the Miami Heat to go on and win that series. I think that was a terrible matchup for the Hawks. So they go in and they capitalize this summer. We don't know how the fit works with DeJounte. Like, there's questions about it, but they do it anyways because the cost, in my opinion, was not that high. It was Gallinari and some picks. Did you think that cost was really that much for the Atlanta Hawks to go and get a player like DeJounte?
No, I don't think so, especially when you look, we'll cover the Rudy Gobert trade later, but when you compare it to some of these other trades and you look at what Brooklyn Nets are asking for Kevin Durant, obviously DeJounte is not on either of those two. He's not on their level, but still, 3 first rounds, a pick swap, and then Gallo's expiring contract. I mean, that's really not bad. Just to harken back to what you said earlier, the Miami Heat, not only did they beat the Hawks, but they beat them up, so they had to get better, and so far they've done that this offseason. And I think DeJounte, he really is going to improve Trae Young's game. He's going to cover up a lot of the weak spots, and I think they swung for the fences and they hit a home run.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said at the beginning of this pod, hearing that DeJounte was even on the market was a shock to me. I got it after looking at it a little bit. I understand why the Spurs did it, but throughout this whole season and the season that DeJounte had, I just didn't expect that to happen. Now, of course, the number one question everyone immediately has is Murray is not really a 2. Trae Young has not done a whole lot off ball. So how do you see this fit on offense? Because on defense, it's quite obvious. I mean, this does really help. Just how Steph Curry had Klay Thompson in his prime covering his toughest matchups at PG. DeJounte is going to immediately probably take over that. And that helps. You're going to have a playmaker. You're going to have 2 playmakers on the floor, but I'm assuming pretty much the entire game you're going to have at least a 1-star level playmaker on the floor, and that's cool. But when they're together, like, how do you see this fit? What do you think Trae Young will be improving on to make that work? And are you worried about DeJounte off ball in the minutes that he has to not play catch and shoot, but we'll kind of have to adapt because this is much different than what was happening in San Antonio for him?
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be an adjustment period. It's not going to be the smoothest of transitions, but no doubt, like this is going to benefit both players. One, we've seen just a little bit of Trae playing off ball, and when he does, he excels in that role. And this is something he's excited about. Hawks fans, a lot of folks are saying this is going to be what unlocks the next phase of his game. Maybe makes him look a little bit more like Steph Curry. So that's certainly exciting. And they're for sure going to play with a lot more pace. They're going to be scoring more points off turnovers, which is 2 areas where the team has lacked. So, they had the first or second best offensive rating throughout the entire regular season. So even if they take a slight step back offensively, where they make their gains on defense is what's going to save them. But really, I just don't see that many negatives about it, other than maybe a little bit of a feeling out process. This is an all-around positive.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the conclusion that I came to afterwards. I talked about it on another pod when it initially happened, and I was just going, I think that both of them recognize, obviously, the adjustment that'll need to be made for the fit, but what you get as an addition with DeJounte, you do this type of thing, especially if you're the Hawks and we were in the conference finals. The East got much tougher in just 1 year. I kind of felt like after 2021, there was, I just never really thought that team with that specific roster was going to make that run again. And then obviously things got really hard throughout the season. So if you can make a move like DeJounte for, like you said, a pick swap, an expiring contract and some other picks, you absolutely do that. So I think it was a smart move for the Hawks. And because of the DeJounte trade, I feel like trading Kevin Huerter more or less went under the radar. Nobody really had any kind of like dialogue about that. So what did you think of that one? Because that I thought, with the role he had played in 21 and him being a shooter, I was like, okay, cool. So now they've got this on top of DeJounte, and he's a king like 2 days later. What did you make of that trade?
Yeah, Hawks fans aren't too crazy about that one. I think they made the trade just because there's a bit of a logjam in the backcourt, and honestly, it's starting to look more like a cost-cutting measure because as soon as the Hawks completed that DeJounte Murray trade, they've gone out of their way to try to wiggle under the luxury tax. They're going to be right there at that line, and that's been a big point of contention in Atlanta. Every time anybody gets a hold of the owner or the general manager and any kind of media availability, they're asking them, hey, are you willing to go into the luxury tax to try to put together another team that could win a championship? And they've said on multiple occasions, we're not afraid of the luxury tax. But so far they've been making a lot of cost-cutting moves. They've gone out and signed a few veterans on veteran minimum contracts. But back to the Kevin Huerter trade, you know, they get Justin Holiday, Mo Harkless, two pretty inexpensive players who are both defensive minded, so that's good. And they also picked up a lottery protected draft pick as well, which is good because they just sold off all their draft capital last week. So you got to have something in the pipeline. So all in all, it does make sense, and definitely wish Kevin the best in Sacramento. But man, you can tell in his eyes he's hurting. I don't know if you've seen the pictures and videos of him in Summer League, but it seems like my man is not excited to be in Sacramento.
Yeah, and can you blame them? I mean,
no. God, no.
Especially with ATL looking like they could potentially do something after that trade, and you've mostly been playing for something for the last 2 years. It felt like you were playing for something. Sacramento, I see the vision. Well, all right, let me not lie. I don't see the vision because what they did, with Sabonis, I felt like that was a very short-term move. I do somewhat like the offseason that they had. I like the way Keegan Murray looks right now, so at least they might put themselves in contention for something. But when you're just going to a franchise like Sacramento, there's obvious reasons that you would have some hurt in your eyes every time you're in public. But more Kings talk later in the summer, maybe, for those of y'all that are listening. If I could find somebody that covers the Kings, we'll do such a thing. So I referenced the Hawks 2021 run a couple of times here, got within just a couple of wins of the NBA Finals. They come into this season, and a quote that stuck out to me from the very beginning, which I never, again, it's just a quote, so I never gave it too much power, but it did kind of stick with me that Trae Young kind of came in and said immediately within the first week or first 2 weeks that the regular season was boring after having gotten to the playoffs. And I kind of always, that one kind of gave me a pause. And then the season went how it did. What was, do you think, the biggest, and there was definitely injuries too, but I'm wondering if you think there was anything more like the difference between that 2021 Hawks team that made that surprise run, because it was a surprise run and it was not a fluke. I always try to remind people there wasn't a bunch of injuries in that run that had them in the conference finals. They were competing with the Bucks before Trae Young went out. They were like right there. So what was the difference between that team and then the one that came into this year struggling to get into the playoffs?
Yeah, as always, you hit the nail on the head. They came in fat and happy, and of course everybody's giving Trae a rough time because he had that slip where he's like, regular season's boring. And then, but even Clint Capella came out a couple months later and said the same thing. He said, man, we showed up at training camp and nobody was excited to be there. And, and that just speaks, there's a locker room issue, or there's a culture problem in the locker room when a bunch of 24, 25-year-old guys who've never won a championship are complaining about it being boring. It's like, man, y'all aren't the 2002 Lakers. Y'all can't complain about the regular season being boring. You don't have that right yet. Even if it's true, like, you gotta have some better PR messaging than that, at least, and you gotta find a way to be motivated. So honestly, they came in fat and happy, got off to a slow start. A lot of folks, they point to some injuries and COVID, but honestly, that's the entire NBA. You can't use that as an excuse. And then they didn't improve at all during the summer of 2021 free agency, which I get. Everybody was super high on the young core. We thought Kevin Huerter had unlocked his defense, so I understand that. And then the trade deadline comes and goes, and they didn't make a single move to try to get better. And you can't stay stagnant in the NBA. It's an arms race, and what's good in 2021 isn't necessarily going to be good in 2022. So you always got to find a way to get better. All their opponents got better. So honestly, it was kind of a wasted year. It was a career year for Trae Young, and it got tossed away.
Yeah, and if anything, at least it was a learning experience on multiple fronts, because like you said, they came in flat because they had made the conference finals, but you hadn't even made the finals, you hadn't won anything, and then the front office hadn't gotten better because they trusted that core. So it seems, at least we know this summer, that they've addressed one of those things, and having a sense of urgency to change the roster and get some help. And we'll see how they come into next season, because like you said, it's probably a young thing, and especially when that kind of sentiment comes from the top of Trae Young, who's pretty much supposed to be the leader of the team, that sets the tone for the season. So I remember hearing that on this podcast. I was like, whoa, like, relax. I hadn't made it yet.
But the good news is, man, Trey really is different when it comes to his work ethic and his mentality. Like everybody's got their own PR team putting out messaging, but I mean, from every single account I've ever heard, this is the most competitive dude you've ever met. Like I talked to his trainer growing up, and he's like, I could tell when he was a little kid, I was like, this kid's different, not just because of his physical skills, but like his mentality. And so, yeah, I think it was a slip of the tongue, but he's going to come back and improve. Like a lot of folks, they just kind of gloss over the fact that the NBA just completely nuked his ability to get to the free throw line, and it took him about 2 weeks to adjust. And then he led the league in total points and total assists. So he really is different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To your free throw point, I feel like that was a conversation everyone was having, and it died so quickly that a lot of people have forgotten about it. A lot of people have forgotten about the rule change, but that absolutely was a thing when we heard the rules were changing. There was probably 3 players everyone put a microscope on, and Trae Young was one of them. And he went on to still probably have the best season of his career. So much props for that. And yeah, you know the work is there, because one thing that sticks out, especially because we're in Summer League right now, I remember how hard he struggled in Summer League and how people were just writing him off from that point. So he's kind of always dealt with, you know, that factor of people more or less questioning him, and you know, he came in to turn that around. So for anybody, we're going to talk about Summer League a little bit, but those of y'all watching Summer League right now and judging players harshly, just remember Trae Young, who was probably, if his team was winning, could have probably been an MVP candidate this year. Just remember, he absolutely did not, you know, he didn't come in hot. It took him some time. And
That's right.
So we talked about the differences between the Hawks. We're going to see what happens with them this year. I had one more topic on that. It will come back to me. I guess I would just go ahead and pivot now to a question that people are having with John Collins, because his name has been floated around in trade talks for a long time now. I feel it's dating back to the trade deadline, and no one quite knows, are the Hawks holding onto him? Or are they looking to just go ahead and cash him up for other pieces? What is your sense there with Collins? You think he's going to be a part of this long-term roster, or he'll kind of stick it out just somewhat through the season, or are they really still looking to move him for something else on the roster?
Honestly, I'm shocked he's still on the roster at this point. Atlanta's front office has gone out of their way to remind him that he's expendable every step of the way for the past 2 years. They let him hit restricted free agency, and he proved himself. They let him hit restricted free agency, and he cashed in on a nice deal. And then they immediately start shopping him around. They pick up right where they left off with the trade talks. And it hit a fever pitch at the end of the season leading into this summer. It really seemed like we had seen John Collins in a Hawks uniform for the last time. So I don't understand it. I really don't understand why they seem so eager to move on from John Collins. He's more than a solid. I think he's a third option on a championship contending team. He's got a blue-collar, hard hat kind of work ethic. He's an Army brat, so he definitely has that sort of mentality, which is something that the Hawks roster really lacks a lot, especially this past season. And people forget he's only 24 years old. We talk about him like he's some sort of grizzled veteran, but he's the same age as DeAndre Hunter. So to answer your question, I think he'll be on the roster come opening night. And I think fans are going to be subjected again to more trade talks come next February. It's going to be Groundhog's Day all over again.
Yeah, that one, especially after the run they had, that did kind of confuse me, because I know the trade talks had been heavy pretty much, like you said, ever since then. So I just been kind of waiting. Obviously, the market as a whole feels like it's at a standstill right now. So who knows what's going to happen in the coming months. But that will be interesting to see what happens with John Collins. As you were talking, I remembered, because you said DeAndre Hunter, and I was thinking about some of the younger players, specifically in Okongwu, who I felt like had a good bit of opportunity because of Clint Capella and his health situation throughout this year. And I feel like he more than just showed some flashes. Just from the outside looking in, I don't cover the Hawks, but it kind of seems like if the choices is Capella and Okongwu going forward, Okongwu is kind of the future in that position. Is that the sense that you're getting, and what did you see from him this season that makes you excited going forward, if anything at all? Because I liked a lot of what I saw from Onyeka Okongwu.
You're exactly right. He is the future for the Atlanta Hawks post-play. There's no doubt about it. He's dealt with some injuries through his first 2 years. He got off to a slow start during his rookie season, but then he came alive during the playoffs, and everybody said, yo, who is this rookie who is sticking with Giannis and sticking with Embiid so tough during the playoffs? So that was great. But then unexpectedly, he had shoulder surgery during the last summer. So he came in and missed the first few months of the season, but honestly picked up right where he left off. And I think that's around a lot of the urgency to break up John and Clint is just because they want to make room for Okongwu. They do believe he is a future part of the future of this franchise. So, and they got to make a move soon. You know, he's moving into his third year, and they got to find out for sure. Like, is he for real or not? And I believe he is. So definitely a believer in him, a believer in his defense and his toughness. And he's undersized, but he really is a tough defender, which is something the Hawks can't afford to lose.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you talk about young names on this roster like Okongwu and DeAndre Hunter, that was the other part of the DeJounte trade where we were going, well, they didn't even have to dig into the youth really, besides the picks. Like they got to keep the exciting young talent on the roster and some important defensive pieces. So yeah, the Hawks are going to be really interesting defensively going forward. We know that that's a question that we have with Trae Young on that end of the ball, but you know, you've got a couple of defenders on this roster. You've got DeJounte to come in and really kind of take up for that now. So I am very interested to see the evolution in both of their games going forward. The last Hawks topic here, their pick, AJ Griffin. Okay, I don't know much about him. What do you think about him and his fit on this roster? And will he be like making an immediate impact, or will he be kind of like worked in? Yeah, honestly, explain it to me like I'm 5 if you can, because he's not playing a summer league either. So.
Exactly. No, I'll be real blunt. We're not going to see much of him during his rookie season. It's clear that the Hawks have a type. They like big wings out of Duke with questionable injury history. They've gone Cam Reddish, Jalen Johnson, and now AJ Griffin, like 3 out of 4 years. So they clearly have a type. But then right after they drafted him, the new general manager, Landry Fields, he said, honestly, we didn't expect him to be there. Didn't have any communications with him during the draft process. Don't really know how much of an impact he's going to have during his rookie season. And as you know, I'm not sure if everyone knows, Nate McMillan, the Hawks head coach, does not play rookies.
I see.
Jalen Johnson and Sharif Cooper, they played historically low minutes. And, you know, he had to get nudged along to play Okongwu the previous season. So he's definitely an old school coach, not a big fan of playing rookies, let them earn it. So I think AJ Griffin, I think he's looking at a season similar to Jalen Johnson last year, where he doesn't get off the bench very much, but he's a lights out shooter, and he's big and he's young. He's only 18 years old, so there's a lot to like. I think he's going to be spending most of his time in College Park with the Skyhawks.
Oh yeah, thank you for bringing them up. I absolutely should have had that on here because I did some work with the G League this year, so I got to dabble into the G, and in that process, I got pretty familiar with Sharif Cooper, obviously Jalen Johnson, and so but with Sharif Cooper specifically, I've always gotten the sense because he showed some flashes. I've always had the sense that maybe his future is not with ATL, especially now, like with the guard depth. Do you think, especially with the guard depth and the youth, you kind of think he'll ever get a chance on this roster? Because I can see the potential if he has somewhere to go and develop. I liked some what he did in the G this year, and then you can speak on Jalen Johnson as well, because I know some people were very high on some of what they saw at the lower level.
For sure. So they both look great in the G League. Jalen Johnson and Sharif Cooper, they balled out in the G League. So, and then as for Sharif Cooper, he's in a little bit more of a precarious situation, second round draft pick. So right now he's a restricted free agent. I doubt any team swoops in and throws a contract at him. So I could see him coming back to Atlanta on a two-way deal, similar to the way Skylar Mays did last year. But it's going, like you said, man, it's going to be tough for him to break the rotation, especially now with DeJounte Murray. And I do think he's nice. I think he's got a future in the NBA. He's just got to find the right team. Like, it's just, you know, a lot of things have to click, man. And you can end up in the wrong organization and be a solid player. Like, look at Cam Reddish, man. He got traded to the New York Knicks, and now it looks like he's on the fringe of the league just within a matter of a few months. So, you know, I hope Sharif, if he doesn't get the opportunity in Atlanta, I hope he gets it somewhere, because he is a nice player and he deserves to be on an NBA roster somewhere.
Yeah, situation is just so important, because I remember even dating back to Summer League last year, seeing Sharif play. It just always kind of seems like his reads his skill level is a little bit more advanced than where he's playing. Every time I've ever peeped in on a game, and I'm going, wow, this is unfortunate for a guy with this skill set to be drafted to the same team as Trae Young, because I don't think he's ever going to get a real chance to like blossom here. So I think Sharif could very well be a thing, you know, a couple of years later if he finds himself in a different situation. That's a name that I would pay attention to. But yeah, G League, I always tell people who listen to this pod, that's a very underutilized resource for fans. You can go there and you can see some of the future for some of these teams. It was a fun follow this year. So that about covers the Atlanta Hawks. Definitely one of the more exciting teams this year, trying to recoup in what is now a crazy Eastern Conference. So good on the front office for making those moves, and we will see what happens with John Collins, because that is a very precarious situation. And if they do trade him, very interested in what else, what type of pieces they would be looking for on that roster. We will move into getting your perspective on this Gobert trade, because I did talk about it in the last pod. That was actually what my last pod was centered around. However, that was just my perspective. I did that one solo. I did not have a guest, and a lot of people are not high on this trade at all because of what it cost. It was so high that this happening at the same time as the Durant trade request it seems like it's thrown things out of whack, because they're going, wow, 5 picks and players for Gobert. All right, then Durant, you got to give us. You have to give us your entire front office. You have to give us everything. All of it. So we'll talk about Gobert and Mitchell. But what did you think of the Gobert trade for both teams?
Man, like you said, that price was exorbitant, and I think the timing of that, with now Durant wanting out of Brooklyn, it couldn't happen at a worse time. I don't know. I guess teams, perhaps they're not going to get fleeced anymore for letting go of stars. No more Pau Gasol trades. Like that is absolutely a thing of the past. I don't know who to credit. I don't know if it's Daryl Morey or if these front office executives are just becoming savvier. But man, that was such a huge haul for Gobert, who obviously a great player, excellent regular season player, but then there's a question mark that always lingers on around him during the playoffs. So, I guess Minnesota has to do what they have to do. It was a weak free agency this year, and I'm not sure how many free agents want to go up there and play in Minnesota. So they've got to make those sort of big trades. And then on the flip side of it, it's going to have a huge impact on Donovan Mitchell and the Utah Jazz. Like, I don't know why Donovan Mitchell is going to want to stick around now for what is an apparent rebuild.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up a good point. It was more or less, I feel like what I was saying on last pod was that if you're a team like the Wolves, I didn't bring up the good point there. That, yeah, what free agent ever really goes to the Timberwolves? Whoever wakes up and says, I want to go play in Minnesota, that doesn't happen a lot. So if you're a franchise like that in this ultra competitive Western Conference where these healthy teams are coming back, it feels like at a certain point you just got to kind of make a go for it move. And that's really what I thought they did. Now Cat is going to be shifted to the power forward position. You got Gobert, who can hopefully be a defensive backbone. I know the questions are throughout the playoffs, but my hope is that, and I guess maybe the Wolves won't be done in making moves this summer, but my hope is that they learn from what happened with Gobert in Utah, and that, yes, if you have him around a bunch of guys who are constantly going to get beat off the dribble, Gobert will be useless in the playoffs. You guys will lose very predictably to the Clippers if you can't stay in front of the ball at least some percent of the game. It's hard in the NBA in general, but especially when you were on the Utah Jazz. So I felt like it was a good move for them. And the package that the Utah Jazz got, it does feel like a rebuild. So they got some defenders, but I still don't know if Patrick Beverley is going to play for them. Yeah, it feels like a restart pack, but we hadn't, I don't know, everything just kind of feels mysterious around Donovan Mitchell, because he himself has never requested a trade, but we've also never heard him really commit aside of the contract, which obviously stars go get their money when it's there, but it doesn't mean they actually want to be there. We've never actually heard him say, I want to be here for a long time, and we're gonna stay here. And I don't know, it does feel like to me within the next year, I guess everything is really slow moving right now, but it does feel like Donovan Mitchell's time is it's numbered in Utah, because despite getting some defenders, that doesn't feel like it's going to be a good team as it's currently constructed. I know some people might be on it, but that does seem like a rebuild. So yeah, that's pretty much what we've said about Minnesota. We did mention KD there and how the market is more or less at a standstill because he has requested a trade, which has been, first of all, that entire saga was weird, but now it feels, what's your sense? Do you feel like KD is going to be moved this summer or at all? Because there's so many moving pieces to this. You have a MVP level player that has requested a trade. It's obviously a very toxic situation, but he's he signed a 4-year extension less than 12 months ago, it feels like. Yeah. So the Nets don't, in theory, have to do anything, but also if you get into a situation where for whatever reason at all, we started the year and both KD and Kyrie weren't playing, it feels like Brooklyn can't afford to be bad until they get some draft picks back, because they traded everything. They traded it all for James Harden. And so until you get some picks back, it feels like, even though they're dragging, well, they're not dragging their feet with it. The market is just, they're waiting for somebody to actually bite. Yeah, it feels like you're still somewhat at Kevin Durant's mercy, which that's just the way it is these days. You're at the mercy of your star player when they want to request a trade or whatever they want to do. But yeah, what's your sense with this whole thing? Do you feel like he'll be moved? Do you feel like it's going to drag on? How do you kind of see this playing out? Not a specific team, really, because obviously I don't think any of us have a clue where Kevin Durant would actually be traded at this point.
Man, I don't think Durant gets traded, to be honest. I think he's overplayed his hand. I don't think he has that much leverage. I think the Gobert trade, the way that went down, I think that couldn't have happened at a worse time for everybody, because now we find out that what Brooklyn's wanting in return for Kevin Durant, they want the trade haul, the end all trade hauls. It's like you're going to have to guarantee make your team worse in order to get, probably make two teams worse in order to get Kevin Durant some sort of mega trade. And I just don't know who's going to do that. And I think KD's overplayed his hand on this one. And it may be a little bit of a market correction to some degree of the player empowerment era, because we see these dudes, they sign a huge contract and then 1 to 2 years later they want out. If I'm Brooklyn, I'm calling his bluff. KD's not about to sit out and pull a Ben Simmons.
Right.
He's under contract. I say, all right, buddy, we'll see you in October. And if you're KD, man, give it a shot. You got Kyrie, if he's there. You got Ben Simmons if he's there. And I just don't see it happening. And so what's really weird is I don't think it really makes a huge difference in this one scenario, but there's no trade clause in his contract. I just think he overplayed his hand, and at this point, I think he's on their roster come opening night.
Yeah, it's feeling that way because we keep hearing reports about, oh, this could happen in the next week. This next week is really important. But at the end of the day, this is, to my memory, the most valuable player that's ever requested a trade. At this point in his career, I don't think we really have a precedent for this type of thing. And so when you hear trade reports about the Nets asking for this, you really go, what team in their right mind would do this for a 34-year-old KD? Like, by the time he starts, he's great, but he's still 34, and you're asking teams to basically just whore out their future to have Kevin Durant.
That's exactly right. It is, especially, and for a guy, I mean, I don't think any players come back from an Achilles tear other than maybe Dominique Wilkins, who looks like they haven't missed a step the way KD has. But like you said, at the end of the day, man, he's 34 with a ton of miles on him, and you're asking a team to completely mortgage their entire future on that. I just don't think you'd have to be one really super thirsty team to do that. You would, just a team who isn't going to get any free agents. I just don't know who's going to make that trade, because you're going to probably lose the trade.
So what about Kyrie then? Because that one seems a little bit more direct. The Lakers are in a desperate situation trying to get out from under Westbrook. It seems like everything we've heard, LeBron wants Kyrie. We know that they can fit together, and if they could stay on the floor, Kyrie, AD, and LeBron would be pretty deadly. Do you think that one ends up getting done? Because I don't know. People who were posting pictures yesterday of Kyrie next to Jerry West and some of the Clippers brass, but I've long time said I just don't know why the Clippers would really get involved with this. It feels like a one-to-one thing. The Lakers need Kyrie. Apparently, Kyrie kind of wants to be there. I can see easily why KD ends up staying on the roster, but do you think that one gets done?
Yeah, I would see that one being more likely to happen. LeBron obviously wants to play with him, and I'm sure you saw those videos floating around of Westbrook at Summer League.
Yeah.
It seems like that relationship is cooked. And, why not? The salaries match up pretty well. Why not give both players, both franchises, a little bit of a reset right now? It seems to me like it makes too much sense. So I wouldn't be surprised if that trade goes down. I think it makes LeBron and AD happy. And I think to me, it's a win for the Lake. I'm a Lakers fan, so we're crazy. Everything's win now. Everything, facts be damned. We don't care. Just give us the best players and let them figure it out on the court. So to me, it makes a lot of sense for Kyrie to go to the Lakers, and I could see that one happening over the next month.
I should have asked that at the beginning. I don't know. I just assumed since you were working for the Hawks. Okay, so Lakers fan. Now that's interesting for this point, and for this part. And yeah, no, you're right. Like, it's, as far as we know, it's LeBron's. Well, no, not as far as we know. That's what's on the contract. This is his last actual inked year. So I just feel like going into it with Russell Westbrook would almost assure that this season is probably not going to be satisfactory, and you just don't want you don't want like a C plus. Anything less than like a B minus of a season where LeBron James is making decisions is bad. Is bad for business. Yeah. So I felt like that team is the one team out there that needs to move heaven and earth to get Kyrie on there, and then that'll make things interesting with KD, because that's still not. Just from the trade perspective for the Nets, I think we've been hearing about 3 team deals and Westbrook ending up on the San Antonio Spurs, which would then probably end up leading to a buyout. And the pieces that the Nets would then end up with is like maybe some picks and then Taylor and Horton. So then that makes it really interesting, because now the Nets would no longer even really be in contention. So there's just a whole lot of question marks going on, but it will be interesting to see where it all goes, because the KD market is almost, or the asking price for him is almost too high, and it's just it's put everything in the mud for the offseason except summer league. So that is happening right now. I know you did say at the beginning, both of us are kind of like peeping in on summer league. Neither of us have gotten out to Vegas this year. But is there anything that you've seen from any of like the top prospects or any other, maybe lower name prospects that you've liked in the summer league so far? As we've said before, there's not too much stock to put in it. I know a lot of teams fans are getting excited, and it's nice to see young talent come out and ball out and do what they're supposed to do, but at the end of the day, there's also some guys struggling. We saw Trae Young struggle, so I never put too much stock in it, but it's been fun to watch. Has there been anything that's been even slightly interesting to you over these first few days?
Yeah, for sure. So right now, I think Keegan Murray, he's looked good. He's shown that he's a good player. He really shoots well on the move. He knows how to move around screens. So I don't want to get too hyped, but I think Keegan Murray's look good. Obviously, Chet looks good. As long as he's not battling Kenny Lofton, then Chet, as long as those two don't run into each other, I think Chet's going to be just fine, though. On the flip side, though, I think Jabari Smith, we don't really know much. It could take a while for him. And then, of course, Paulo Banchero, I think he's shown flashes of what he can be. So, not too many surprises, but we'll see how it shakes out. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Jabari Smith, there has been struggles, but I would also like to point out for people, I don't know how many of y'all have been watching Rockets Summer League games, and from the first game, it seems like there is a concentrated effort from some of the Rockets ball handlers to not get him the ball. Now, in the game I saw last night, he got to shoot quite a bit, and it was a bad shooting night for him, but defensively looked pretty solid. And I would just say, there's been a lot of times where he's calling for like a handoff or something, and guys just don't even look his way. It's kind of baffling, because some of the guys that are actually on the Rockets roster right now that he's gonna have to play with. So I did find that much interesting. Paulo Banchero, I'm in Orlando. I've never been a Magic fan, but I am going to Magic games this year. Again,
there we go.
I said not to get too high on Summer League prospects, but when a guy comes in and does what you kind of already saw his potential as in college, I think then you kind of have reason to be excited, because you look at Paolo, you're saying, okay, this is pretty much your modern day Ford. It comes in, is handling the ball. He's obviously going to have to sharpen his shooting, but the skill level, my goodness, just not even just the offensive moves, but the passing right now. I am so excited to see how he fits in with this Orlando roster. He's going to come in on the front court with Franz Wagner and Wendell Carter. If anything else, because there's a lot of mouths to feed in Orlando. It's a young team, if anything else, his passing on this roster is just going to be just amazing to watch. So I am excited. As a Celtic fan, I should not be this excited for another team, but yeah.
No, man, that's fair. They've got an exciting young roster, and if I'm you down there in Orlando, I'm definitely getting down there to some games, because obviously they're not win now or anything, but they got some future stars on that squad.
Yes, yeah, and even their second round pick too. Not sure how much he's gonna play, but God, his first name is slipping me, but his last name is Houston. He's a shooter, so that seems like it might be an interesting second round pick. So yeah, the Magic. For those of y'all that are listening right now, y'all know months ago I told y'all buy some Magic stock. That was before they drafted Paolo, so I bought my stock early. Can't say nothing. Yeah, like you said, Keegan Murray. That does make me question what the Kings' plan is with Harrison Barnes, because they made that go for it move with Sabonis, and that they're trying to make the playoffs right now. And Keegan being a forward and Harrison Barnes being there, and he had a decent season last year, kind of wondering if they're gonna how much run Keegan's actually gonna get. But shout out to the Kings for doing the right thing and not drafting another guard, because I feel like they just tried to get from under that problem by trading Tyrese Halliburton and going with Fox and Davion Mitchell. So yeah, Keegan Murray, very excited for that. Chet, yeah. Also, for me in Orlando, I wanted to see them either end up with Paolo or Chet. Those were the two that I was most fascinated by. So I'll take Paolo, but Chet, my goodness, also going to be great. Number one thing that with him in the draft, I was just going, all right, I want to see what his defense looks like at this level. And so far in the summer league, as a rim protector, I see the potential. Him coming over from the weak side to get some of the blocks that he does, that is going to be fun to watch with this Thunder roster. Obviously, he and Josh Giddey together. Josh Giddey's out there. Shout out to him for playing in the summer league. He's one of those guys that if he didn't play in the summer league, you could have understood, but his passing is just like it was all season. His passing is always on another level. It's the same way right now in summer league. And the other pick, I believe it's Jalen Williams too. I've seen some things from him. The Thunder have just like obviously one of the there's so many young teams with just ridiculously bright futures right now. It's hard to even pinpoint like who you would be most excited about. But yeah, those are some of them. Those are obviously the top level prospects. Kenny Lofton, I've been excited about him since the elite camp. A guy at his size, I was just fascinated because nobody really has his build in the league. Of course, you have Zion, who's also like a smaller tank type build, but Kenny Lofton, I was just wondering, okay, at the NBA level, what does this look like? Defensively, I think it's going to be interesting at the pro level. He's going to have to develop there so he doesn't get into foul trouble. But the size, like you said, he went at Chet a couple of times at the beginning of the game, and he knows how to throw that around. He's got handles.
And he's so smooth. He's so smooth with his moves and everything. Like I have a tweet back from May where I was like, all right, this is officially a Kenny Lofton stand account from this point forward. Like I was watching some of his Team USA tapes and everything, and he's really so well developed. And obviously, like you said, defense is going to be an issue, conditioning, all that. But that man, he's a professional player, and I love that he comes in such a weird frame, and he's not just your usual 6'8" wing player. Different position. Who can guard different positions. He's got a funky build, and I'm so excited about him.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's backing his talk up right now because he went undrafted. I felt like I knew he was going undrafted. Yeah, I went through some of the elite camp stuff and I looked at his stock and I was going, okay, he's probably not going to be drafted. But he tweeted out something about everybody's going to pay is what he said. And so he came out with that type of swag. And so far, it's looking good. And I'm very excited to see what the Grizzlies do. That's a contending team, but it's also a young team. So I want to see how they end up bringing him along.
That's what I tweet out whenever I have like a slow news day and I'm not really getting traffic on the website. Everybody's gonna pay.
Everybody's gonna pay. Yeah, that's the slogan. I hope that one sticks if he ends up really doing something with this. The last prospect I would say I'm super excited about and have been excited about. There's a lot of names out there. Of course, you got Jaden Hardy, who had a great debut and ended up on the Mavericks. So that's a fascinating situation with them losing Jalen Brunson. He needs a lot of development, but I like what I saw because he pretty much fell in the draft. Marjon Beauchamp ending up with the Milwaukee Bucks. This is a young wing defender who in his debut showed a lot of potential. Cam Thomas was wisely calling for switches off of him because he's got a lot of length. He's got a lot of defensive grit, and that's exactly what the Milwaukee Bucks need, really. When Middleton went out, they lacked another kind. They lacked young legs that could really do something on the other side of the ball. They had guys who could space the floor, which he's going to have to work on. But on the defensive side, gosh, if they can make it work with him and Giannis in some lineups, if his shot ends up good enough for him to be in lineups with Giannis, my goodness, they are going to give teams more hell than they already have at the defensive end. So definitely keep an eye on Marjon. And yeah, that pretty much covers the summer league, so far. Goes on until the 17th. So we'll probably have more summer league talk on this pod. The very last thing, because I don't know, I did kind of gloss over it when free agency happened, but were you surprised to see, well, I guess that's not a surprise when someone takes, $250 million on the contract, but Bradley Beal sticking with the Wizards, was that where you kind of saw this going? Because the last quote we had before he signed that was his biggest decision, and what he did in free agency was going to be where he thought he could win, and then he ended up signing with the Wizards. Is that kind of where you saw that going, and was that a surprise? And do you think he even has a no trade clause? Like, did anything about this?
That man, he stood up there and lied to our face, talking about he wants to be wherever he can win. But no, I wasn't surprised at all. I think he opted out of that $36.4 million option, became a free agent. A couple days later, signs a 5-year, $251 million max contract. I'm happy for him. He's a great player, but I don't see how this ends well for one of the two parties. The Wizards are going to, so I see it going one of two ways. Either he balls out, and in a year or two, he's going to start taking looking at things from a different perspective and say, hey, I want to win right now, and he's going to demand a trade. Or maybe his production falls off a little bit, or God forbid an injury or anything like that, and then the Wizards are stuck with this contract. So I just don't see how it ends well for the Wizards, to be honest.
Yeah, because even with so the amount of money is one thing, but the no trade clause means that if and when that time does come a couple of years down the road, that he's going, all right, nothing has happened with development on Washington, they haven't brought me anybody, I want to be traded. He can essentially choose where he goes, because he can say no to certain deals, so they can't just send him to the middle of nowhere when that day comes. So that, yeah, anytime, and I get it, like if you're Washington, what do? You could have restarted, exactly. I guess, but it's kind of like with the Blazers also. So that happened since the last time I've been on podcast. They extended Lillard up to 2027. They gave him that extra 2 years. He's gonna be 36 years old, getting $60 million at that time. So wow. I guess the difference there is Lillard has said so much about being loyal that at this point it would be so screwed up for him to end up asking for a trade at any point in the future, because he's made a point about the name on the front of the jersey and how he doesn't want to team up with guys. So I guess if you're the Blazers, you can kind of at least rest on the fact that he probably won't be asking out unless you just royally screw some things up. And even for Portland, I mean, I don't think their moves are gonna do anything to move the needle for them, but they've at least made efforts this summer and going and getting a Jeremy Grant and Gary Payton. We have no clue what Shedon Sharpe is going to look like, because he has a labral tear in the shoulder, so he can't play for a lot of summer leagues. So we'll see how it happens with that. But yeah, Lillard making that type of money at the end of his career, when he slowed down this year because of an abdominal injury. We will see where that goes. And yeah, as far as it goes on the list, it looks like we are last thing, very, 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 very last thing. Do you know anything about Jaden Ivey and his fit with Cade? Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ivy he's really looked good so far in summer league, and I think the Pistons are in good shape. Both Jaden and Jalen are going to be good pros. I think if Cade can take a leap over the next 1 to 2 seasons, I think that will give the two younger players a chance to grow with no pressure. Ivy has a great first step. Duran is a big athletic freak. So yeah, I think the Pistons are looking good. I'm pretty high on them right now.
Yeah, my sense is that we're going to be looking and asking, why did teams trade Jalen Duren? Because, yeah, like you said, athletic freak. So far, I've seen some nice passing reads from him. And fitting on this roster with Cade and Ivy, that just to get them both at the same time, I think is going to work out really well. And then I've already been giving the Pistons praise this summer for moving very quickly on this thing and building around Cade, basically, because we saw the type of rookie season that Cade had, and he is going to be him. The finishing package is there, the passing is there. He averaged around 6 assists this year. Would have averaged more if guys could have hit more shots around him. So this is kind of like how the Hawks have got Trey and DeJounte together. It's been interesting, because now you're gonna have Ivy and Cade in the backcourt. At its best, I think you're gonna have another creator in Ivy when you need it. So Cade is obviously gonna handle most of those responsibilities, but at other times you're gonna see Ivy with it. He's gonna be in summer league so far. We've already seen his ability to create, very explosive. So the cuts that he's going to be able to make off ball, hopefully, and and having Cade hit him on back doors and such, the connection there is just going to be awesome. That's an awesome pick for the Pistons. I'm glad the Kings didn't draft Ivy, so I am also very high on that. I've got a little bit of Detroit stock, but I've been that way since they got Cade. All right, well, that about wraps it up. Once again, thanks for coming on, Pat, and plug your stuff, your Twitter and where people can find your work. It'll also be in the links in the comment section and description, so they'll be able to find you too.
Yeah, man, for sure. Thanks for having me. Yeah, everybody, they can follow me online at Pat_Benson_Jr. And again, I just want to thank you for having me. I don't think people know what a big fan I am of yours. I've been watching your videos for years and watching you develop just from being a young man passionate about basketball into being a legitimate voice in the basketball world, seeing you interview legends, get flown out to different events, man. It's been nothing short of inspirational to watch you work over the past few years, and I just don't think you hear it enough. So thank you for having me. Thank you for everything you contribute to the basketball world.
Hey, man, absolutely appreciate it. Honestly, I don't even mind not hearing it because I never know how to respond to compliments. Like, I really don't when people do it, but no, I absolutely do appreciate it. And you're killing it too. It's always fun to when I talk to people in the community and they tell me how they've, how they landed their job or how they got here. There's another guy that's working with the Nuggets right now that has a very similar story, and I'm just like, wow, the ways you can make it today or in sports are just crazy. Like, they just the opportunity is just there, and they're like, okay, all of a sudden you're with the team. It's awesome. So no, continued success. Absolutely appreciate you coming on. For viewers, this podcast is on Spotify, it's on Apple Podcasts, it's on YouTube. Hit the like button if you're on YouTube and the bell next to my name if you want notifications when things drop. I'm going to plug all of Pat's stuff in the comment section so you can follow him on Twitter, the book that he was talking about, and his work on the net. Much appreciated, and I will see y'all on the next episode.